Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you on this bright, sunny Saturday here in Boston. I was looking at my BookTube videos this morning. One of the first things I do once I'm all settled back in after bean time is to check my subscription feed on BookTube. Before I go wandering elsewhere on BookTube and elsewhere on the far hinterlands of YouTube, I check the subscriptions first. And there was a video by my nemesis, Brian, at Bookish, one of his great Saturday hodgepodge videos that often cause a dust-up between us. Often he will stake out some indefensible position and try to defend it, even though he knows perfectly well what I think about it. And that didn't happen this time around. The hodgepodge videos are usually adorable. They're usually just great, good fun. And I have to admit, and I'm sure that a lot of you aren't going to be surprised by this, the ones that get a bee in my bonnet are more enjoyable than the ones that aren't. There was nothing controversial in this Saturday hodgepodge video. I'll leave a link to it down below. And one of the reasons I'll link to it is because embedded in this video of Brian's was a tag. And the tag reflects pretty much the only negative note cast throughout this hodgepodge video. I am discounting his ongoing attempts to defend the sonic sludge that is jazz, the music form jazz. Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, I think, has opined to Brian that jazz is unlistenable garbage. And that bothers Brian, of course. It bothers all the jazz fans that are out there. They like their unlistenable garbage. And as a result, Brian has been trying to recommend jazz pieces that might work to win Jason over. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's certainly not going to happen with me. If Kinda Blue can't do it, then nothing can for me. I'm willing to grant to jazz aficionados that maybe there's something going on there that I don't understand. But in the meantime, John Philip Sousa all the time. But one of the only negative things that was partially reflected in this hodgepodge video was Brian noting, as he noted on Twitter, where he spends a great deal of time, he noting in this video that when he is out and about, he notices that a significant portion of the people that he's seeing aren't wearing face masks. And I have noticed the same thing. I've commented on it a couple of times on this channel where I will be out and about and I will just start to count. Out of irritation, I will start to count the people who aren't wearing face masks in the middle of a national pandemic. Construction workers, for instance, who represent right now probably 70% of the foot traffic on this entire road, never wear face masks. They don't even carry them. They don't even have them with them. And it's definitely a matter of principle. And not just that they think somehow that a construction site renders them immune. It's definitely a matter of principle. In other words, it's a reflection of the news they watch at night. Because there's a place right here in this neighborhood, a fry shop, a great place. Terrific, tasty food, huge portions, reasonable prices, nice staff. And they have a sign on the door that says no one can enter unless they're wearing a face mask. And for years, construction has been going on this road since Roman times. As far as anyone can tell, as far as old sepia tone photographs or the very first moving pictures can delineate, there has been the same construction work with the same crew. I'm now dealing with their biological descendants working on this road as long as there's been a road here. And for all I know, they were digging and redigging it when it was just a dirt path. But for years and years, those construction workers during the weekdays, Monday through Friday, were a huge percentage of the foot traffic of that fry shop. They went at lunch, all of them together every day, to that fry shop to order great food. And they don't anymore. They don't do it anymore. And that means that they're not wearing face masks is a principled thing. They see that sign, they know perfectly well that they can't eat there unless they're wearing a face mask for the protection of other people, and they won't do it. And maybe that's reflected in the nightly news. We've seen the limited amount of the nightly news, of the news cycle here in the United States that has not been commandeered by the audio clips from Bob Woodward's forthcoming book detailing that Donald Trump knew exactly how deadly this plague was, knew it long before the American people knew it, knew what kind of dangers it represented, and had already decided to lie to the American people about it. And is still lying to the American people about it, even though the audio clips have come out. And the whole economy tanked. 190,000 Americans dead, 1 million infected, Who knows how many long-term side effects? Schools closed, the economy dead, businesses shuttered, riots. And even despite all of that, Donald Trump was at a Klan rally of his just the other day, pounding the podium and telling the I think maybe it was Minnesota or Michigan, that they should tell their governor that they want their state opened back up again, because the pandemic is in the past. I handled it perfectly. I handled it better, frankly, than anyone could have possibly imagined. And now it's in the past, and you need to open this state up again. 30,000 new cases on the day that he said that. So he's still lying about it, and that is the lion's share of the news coverage. The lion's share of the news coverage is that the president knew about this in January and early February, when, had he constructed a national response, a federal response at that time, the whole picture in the United States today would be different. Everything would be different. Life would be back to normal, and he would have an absolutely guaranteed legal re-election. But instead, that's not the case. But one of the little things that has been sidelined by that bigger news is that the numbers certainly indicate that wearing a mask, that large swaths of the population wearing face masks in their day-to-day activities works, that it decreases the amount of new incidents. This has always been a little bit of a tricky subject for me. I'm not going to argue with data. I'm especially not going to argue with broader common sense, even though I have to argue about the actual biology of COVID-19 itself, which is known. And the only way that you can contract this virus is by prolonged intimate contact with someone who is shedding the virus themselves. Unprotected, prolonged intimate contact. That means you're in a closed room with them, and neither one of you is wearing a mask for 20 minutes or so. Despite what fringe elements may be saying, despite what details from the latest scientific reports may be ginned up on the news, it is virtually impossible to contract this virus in the open air when it's lurking around on the ground or in the bushes or behind your trash cans. And it's, unless you're licking your own fingers, it's very difficult to contract it from a solid surface. The way you get this virus is from prolonged 20-minute or longer intimate contact with someone who is shedding the virus, whether they have symptoms or not. And you can see by that reality, if you extend that reality just a little, you can see why some people may object to wearing a mask when they're out and about in their normal day, because they're not doing that as far as they know. And the key to wearing a mask out in public, the reason why it's a great idea for you and for everybody around you, it's not just the Trump Klan members at his rally saying, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. It's not just you. It's not just you. You are breathing. Until you die, you're breathing everywhere you go. You can infect other people. And the reason why a mask is a good idea is because when you leave your house, you don't know what kind of circumstances you're going to be in the course of a given day. No, you can make the most fine-tuned plans in the world. You can't guarantee that. The mask guarantees that you will, when you enter a situation where you might shed the virus if you have it or contract it if you don't, the mask guarantees that when you wander into one of those circumstances, you won't have to remember to suddenly take precautions. You'll already have them on your face. To say nothing of the fact of how good this will be for the country in just ordinary cold and flu season, which is only a couple of months away for most of the country. So it's infuriating for me because no matter what, the mask mandates for all the states that have them, Massachusetts has a mask mandate. The details are not what they are typically reported. Typically, they're reported you should wear a mask all the time when you're outside. That's actually not the actual wording is that you are required to wear a mask when outside, when you cannot social distance. 6 feet. Keep 6 feet distance between you and everybody else. So I'm not really sure why Massachusetts watchdogs are so insistent on joggers and bikers wearing masks when their activity is definition of social distancing. They are not lingering around other people, or they wouldn't be doing that activity. I think it might have to do, again, with what I said, which is that that's not the only thing you're doing. You're not doing that 100% of the time that you're outside, and you don't know when you'll be interrupted from doing that. Better to be safe than sorry. And you know, my life here in the United States, the lives of everyone I know in the United States, Republican and Democrat, everywhere in this country, would be so much different today in mid-September if in mid-March or mid-February the President of the United States had got in front of a podium and said, better to be safe than sorry. Instead, for months, he has been saying the equivalent of better sorry than safe. Maddening. Absolutely maddening. And in a normal world, in any normal world, in any world before 2016, an incredibly culpable moment. It would end presidency. It would make sure it would be a permanent black mark against this president for the rest of time. And yet, on Wednesday or Thursday, maybe even as early as Tuesday, national polling will come out on this very subject, and I'd be willing to bet that there isn't even a fractional wavering in the support of Donald Trump's cult members, the 35% of the country that think he is a god, and that have abandoned they have abandoned their reason. They only believe what he says, and what he does is right by nature of the fact that he did it. They don't need an explanation. They don't have to come up with one on their own. They don't need to think of it at all. He is right in all things at all times. I'd be willing to bet there hasn't been a fractional wavering in that support, even though all of those people know people who have been affected. All those people have been affected. They've lost jobs. Their states have lost income. They are travel restricted. They can't go on that trip to Disneyland. They can't go on that trip to Italy. Even though they are personally hurt by this, I'd be willing to bet it had no effect on them whatsoever. And it's all for, at the heart of it, a very simple thing. Just wearing a mask. Just wear a mask when you're out and about. That's all. It's a simple thing. They are not hard to come by anymore. They don't need to be particularly rigorous medical brand. Studies have shown that even cloth over your face will work fairly well. You probably, since you're spoiled for choices now in this country, you probably want to avoid that. As long as you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. The key is what you might have seen on that Bill Nye video, where he put a cloth face mask over his face and held up a candle and was able to blow the candle out, even with the mask on. Then he put an actual mask, surgical mask on his face, something that's designed to stop particle flow, and did the same thing and could not blow out the flame from the same distance. I know the cloth masks are more comfortable, but one way or another, Brian saw those percentages. They are, if anything, worse where I am. Massachusetts, I think, is going to rebound so hard. We were doing so well with common sense protective measures among the population. Common sense stuff. Wear a mask. Keep your distance. Try not to touch your face when you haven't disinfected your hands. No large public gatherings. But when I go out and about now, I am lucky if I see 50% of people wearing masks. And again, it has to be principle. It can't be ignorance at this point. In mid-September, of a year that is 100% solely defined by a pandemic, there's no chance that this news hasn't filtered in to every pocket. It's not like Russian bounties on American soldiers in the field, where I would be willing to bet 35% of adult Americans don't have any idea that story even exists. But the pandemic, everybody knows. So it has to be principle. When I see a young college undergraduate, and there are 4 of them walking down the sidewalk, 3 of them have face masks on and 1 of them doesn't, that has to be a decision. That has to be that particular college undergraduate saying, I don't think I need one. So since my percentages are around here are, if anything, worse than Brian's, and that definitely gives me the same motive that he had to make this tag. He did a tag. I have it here. It's called a wear a mask tag. Very simple thing that is designed to get us to talk about a few masks in literature and pop culture, but also to raise awareness of this fact, to make sure that we are aware. It gets a little wearying. New social habits always do, but to make sure that we stay aware that these things are necessary. That they work to decrease new infections and infectious spread. So I thought I would do the wear a mask tag. I'm not sure 100% how I'm supposed to signal this. I think in the title of the video I will call it the wear a mask tag, and then I'll do the hashtag. I don't know how hashtags work. I'm a YouTuber and I don't know how hashtags work. But there are 3 iterations that Brian uses as a prompt, although just discussing some mask or a combination of masks in the literature that you read, I'm sure would be fine to qualify. The 3 iterations are a character who wears a mask, a character who conceals something about themselves, whether they do it with a mask or not, and a character that wears something protective on their head. And I was going through, I naturally had fun going through my books, thinking of, the obvious answers, the man in the iron mask and whatnot. But I remember that in Brian's video, he makes a fugitive mention of comic books. And I decided to concentrate on those. So I want to show you, I'm not sure that they align with these 3 things. We'll take a look at them and see if they do. But I thought, when I realized that I wasn't going to have any luck narrowing down books, I sat down and tried to think about comics. Naturally, masks are synonymous with superheroes, even though the greatest superhero of them all doesn't wear one. He doesn't wear one as a superhero, but he definitely wears a kind of mask in his civilian identity. Most superheroes are the other way around. They wear a mask when they're in their superhero identity so that they can go about their normal lives. Superman does not, I think, under the assumption on the part of his earliest writers that the contrast is so enormous between a being who can leap tall buildings in a single bound and juggle boulders and cars with a mild-mannered reporter. The contrast is so great, I think, that the original mind frame was there isn't much of a need. No one's going to think these 2 people are the same person, no matter how similar they look. And that has only been enhanced over time. I left out that sort of thing and instead thought, because for instance, my 2 favorite superheroes, my favorite superhero in DC Comics is Superman. My favorite superhero in Marvel Comics is Thor, and neither one of them wears masks. They have another way to protect their civilian identity. So instead, I started thinking about mask wearing. And I came up with 3 examples. Now, the first one is one of the most famous masks in all of comics. A very old and very established character who has been a best-selling star in his own book for longer than most characters have even existed. And who is extremely well known, and that is Robin, the Boy Wonder. This is the DC Comics 100-page super spectacular 80th anniversary edition with a terrific cover there. There's Robin leaping the rooftops of Gotham City, and we just barely see the hint of Batman's cloak. Robin has the famous domino mask, and in all of the iterations in this book, he always has. He's always had that little domino mask on his face. And for a while, when I was reading Robin a long, long time ago, I wondered why that was. Because Dick Grayson is an orphan, and he was the son of circus acrobats who presumably travel all over as circuses do. It's highly unlikely that anyone would ever recognize him if he didn't wear a mask. And then I realized, it doesn't take long to realize that Dick Grayson is the ward of Bruce Wayne, of stately Wayne Manor. And that would be a way to sort of get a crowbar into Batman's secret identity. So Dick Grayson has to wear the little domino mask, even though, as facial recognition experts will tell you, a face covering that only covers about 15% of the face is effectively worthless. In fact, facial recognition experts will tell you that Batman's cowl is also effectively worthless. The real estate around the mouth is highly identifiable. Half of Batman's face is visible. And wouldn't be. If you think about Batman's mission, it wouldn't be. Half his face wouldn't be visible. The only reason that it stays that way is because that has become the traditional costume design. Otherwise, he would have a top-to-bottom suit like Spider-Man. But one way or another, Robin is our first one. And I guess we could say that he is wearing something to protect himself. He's wearing something to conceal his own identity. And then the next character comes from my favorite iteration of all comic books, Marvel or DC. And that is Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes. Superboy being the Superman when he was a teenager, when he was fighting crime as a teenager in Smallville, who travels 1,000 years in the future to visit the Legion of Superheroes in the 30th century. Who are a team of teenage superheroes from planets all over the United Federation of Planets who come to Earth to join the Legion and represent their homeworlds and have adventures and fight crime and keep the peace. As that description will probably tell you, there are almost no masks. in the Legion of Superheroes, obviously, because the members are proud representatives of their homeworlds. They're not hiding anything. Most of them aren't hiding anything. In relatively recent years, the last 30 years or so, the Legion has featured a character called Censor Girl. Those of you who know her origin will know that she is wearing a face mask specifically because when she was first introduced, immediately after Crisis on Infinite Earths, she was indeed hiding her identity, even from the Legion. But most of the Legion does not wear a mask, with one conspicuous exception that I want to show you. Have I got it here? Have I got... I want to make sure I have a good picture. Yes, there we go. A long, long time ago, two Legionnaires got married, and there was a huge extra size issue commemorating that. And in the back, there was a breakdown of the origins and powers of the Legion of Superheroes. Give you little page panels for all of the various members, where they come from, what their personality's like, what their superpowers are. And when you get to the end of all of that, there's a somber panel showing 3 characters: Chemical King, Invisible Kid, and Pharaoh Lad. As you can see, Pharaoh Lad is wearing a mask. He's in fact wearing a helmet over his head that only shows his eyes. Pharaoh Lad was a mutant named Andrew Nolan from Earth. He and his twin brother had the mutation of being able to transform their bodies into an iron-like substance that was virtually invulnerable. That was it. That was their superpower. And the reason they wore the masks is because the same mutation also made their faces hideous. And we're just told that matter-of-factly in Legion lore, in Legion mythology. I always had questions about that. Pharaoh Lad was killed off fairly early, given a heroic death. Far more heroic than Chemical King's, for instance. But I always wondered about that for a couple of reasons. One, what about 30th century science and reconstructive surgery? Surely nothing is beyond the reconstructive surgery of 1,000 years from now. And 2, what about their mind frames? I mean, it's the 21st century, and Andrew Nolan could walk around in most parts of the world without more than a slightly curious glance from people around him. Certainly no judgment, no mockery, no people shielding their faces and running in fear. And that's now, not 1,000 years from now. So I wondered why the Nolan brothers had to cover their faces. I wondered why that would be true. But one way or another, Pharaoh Lad has the almost singular distinction of being one of the only Legionnaires ever to wear a mask. And in his case, it isn't protective, of course, because he can transform his skin into something much harder than his uniform. It's to protect others. It's to protect himself from the judgment of others, and to protect others from the sight of his naked face. And when we're talking about using a face to hide your using a mask to hide your disfigured face, surely the #1 spot in Marvel Comics for a character who decides to do that goes to Dr. Doom. There is a great John Romita Sr. cover. This is Bring On the Bad Guys by Stan Lee, back when these kinds of things were $6.95 and that was real money. And Dr. Doom is the armored king of Latveria who is the dedicated foe of the Fantastic Four, and who wears a metal mask over his face for a very specific reason. We're given his origin, or in a very early issue of the Fantastic Four, we're told that he was a student, that he was conducting experiments into penetrating the dimensional barriers between our world and the netherworld, the supernatural world, and that he miscalculated. And his experiment blew up and disfigured him. And he was expelled from his school and wandered the hinterlands of Tibet, where Stan Lee apparently thought that all of life's mysteries could be solved in the hinterlands of Tibet. Something goes wrong with you get your hands damaged in a car accident or something like that, or you get your face damaged. Just go wandering into bed and you'll be fine. Stan Lee himself later revised that origin to say that it was a New York university that Dr. Doom visited for some reason, that he matriculated to a New York university instead of Oxford or Cambridge, and that there he met a young Reed Richards, who would go on to be Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four, the smartest character in the Marvel Universe, and that Reed Richards was a little put off by his contemptuous attitude, but also noticed that his calculations for his interdimensional travel or whatnot, his interdimensional penetration, were a few decimal points off, and that he should recheck them before he works up an experiment on them. Doom angrily dismisses him, and then the accident happens, and he disfigured his face, and has an axe to grind against Reed Richards forever afterwards. it's a canny retelling of the story. It draws on the fact that in Doom's original appearance in the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards clearly knows him, but his origin is given in like 3 or 4 panels, and there's no hint of a connection between him and Reed Richards until the story is abridged, is elaborated on to that effect. And the Doom wears his mask because his face has been horribly disfigured. In fact, in the storyline, the monks that he encounters in the mountains of Tibet don't even wait until the metal mask is cool before they clamp it on his face, further disfiguring him. And that has had a workout over the years. Characters have glimpsed Doom's face. There's been an attempt made by Stan Lee and later writers to make him a figure of pathos for that, not just a normal psychopath, but a figure of pathos, because maybe he would be a different person if he hadn't been disfigured like that. Stan Lee's own revamped origin for the character shows that's not true, that he was a megalomaniac even before the accident. And one of the neatest variations that I've seen was done by the fan favorite artist and writer John Byrne, who at one point, I don't remember if it was an imaginary story or in the actual run of his long legendary run on the Fantastic Four, has Doom dramatically remove his face mask, and we see that there's one scar up here. But that he is such an egomaniac that he considered that to be complete disfigurement and hid his face because of it. I can't remember where that little gimmick appeared, but I really liked it. I really liked it when I saw it. That is what Dr. Doom is so upset about, because of course he's a raving egomaniac. You can see on this cover that you might think that 2 other characters are wearing masks, the Red Skull and the Green Goblin. The Red Skull is not wearing a mask. In the now canonical version of his origin, that's just what his face looks like after a botched experiment. But the Green Goblin is wearing a mask. Norman Osborn put on a goblin mask and a goblin hat and a goblin costume for reasons that pass understanding. Green Goblin's origin story doesn't make any sense of that. Why he would pick a Halloween costume? I'm guessing that Stan Lee just said, "I've got this new character." Just told Steve Ditko, the artist, "I've got this new character. Show me what he looks like." And the Ditko came up with the image, and Stan Lee didn't bother to explain it. One way or another. Masks are far more common in the Marvel universe with villains than with heroes, because Stan Lee was very much in favor of heroes being bitter against the world because they were malformed, disfigured, that sort of thing. You can honestly wish, even in the 21st century, you can honestly wish that he hadn't gone back to that well quite so often. And that's why I kind of like the little John Byrne gimmick, that maybe Von Doom isn't disfigured, that maybe he's just a tiny little scar, only he thinks that it mars the perfection of his face. But anyway, that is the my version of the Wear a Mask tab. We have Robin the Boy Wonder. We have Pharaoh Lad, who I don't think even makes the cover of this. This is Legion of Superheroes 1050 years in the future. This is a graphic novel. I don't think he even makes the cover. He never does. He was only in a few issues before he got his big send-off against the Sun Eater. And we have Dr. Doom, probably the most famous mask-wearing Marvel hero, unless you count Captain America. So there you go. That is the Wear a Mask tag. I tag all of you, especially in America. And when you do this tag, if you do it, when you're coming up with your examples of characters who wear a mask, conceal something about themselves, or wear something protective on their head, and it doesn't have to be a mask. When you're assembling those, if you choose to do this tag, I would also like to hear your own stories about mask wearing in your location. When you go out and about, what are you seeing? How good or bad does it look? How compliant are people being? And also, do you ever think to say something? Are you ever tempted to say something when you're in a crowded or enclosed space and people aren't wearing masks? And again, I stress, they're not doing that. The reason they're not wearing a mask is on principle. No one is wearing a mask out of ignorance. Or no one is not wearing a mask out of ignorance in September. So it has to be principle. It has to be them deciding, I don't believe this is real. I don't believe that you're in any danger from me, or that I'm in any danger from you. And the cemeteries of the United States are filling with people who believed that and didn't get a chance to recant because they spent their last week on a ventilator in a tent away from the care and attention of their loved ones. And then they died. So they never got a chance to say out loud, I was wrong about that. I really was. I shouldn't have thought that way. I myself have largely resisted the urge to say anything, because if people are making principled decisions, there's no way you're going to talk them out of it, especially in 5 seconds. I've been tempted a couple of times. One time I was on a walk with Frida, and we encountered 2 young people who weren't wearing masks, and they were coming off a public playground, and they stopped because Frida she screamed at them to pet her, and they were petting her, and I was keeping my silence. Frida needs a little bit of that, and then she decides she's had enough, and then she walks on. It wasn't going to be an all-day thing. But when one of them said, "What's her name?" I came an inch away from saying, "Her name is, you're not wearing a goddamn mask." I almost said that. I didn't do it because it wouldn't do any good. As far as I think, it wouldn't do any good. If you think otherwise, if it has done good, if you have managed to get through to people, let me know. When you do this tag, tell me your pandemic stories as well. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.